Hello, good morning. This is Dr. Iftikhar Ahmed Ansari, Department of Political Science, Aligarh Muslim University. Today I am going to talk about the forms of government. Now, the government, as we know, one of the important component of state, and important to an extent that a separate lecture is required on that, and in fact a separate unit on government and its form is required. So, keeping in view that requirement, I present my lecture for today on forms of government. And in this forms of government, we will be talking about its meaning, we will be talking about its different types, and why the government itself is the requirement of modern society, or whether it was having any genesis along with the state, or it is prior to state or prior to society, or it came along with the society. So, these are the questions which we are going to address today in our talk today in discussion. So, when we say forms of government, the question is the government itself. So, a state government, which is a component of state, is a political community. Now, state is a political community, and according to Aristotle, every human is a political animal. So, any human who does not belong to state is either a beast or a god. That is very famous quotation. So, one of the main features of the state is that state is being guided, it is controlled, and it is coordinated by the government. So, government is an organ of the state and acts as an institution and also acts as a machine. So, when government acts, it is said that they are governing, and who the government is governing are called the governed. So, however we define politics, government is undoubtedly the central part of that definition. So, to govern in its broadest sense is to rule and exercise control over others. So, the activity of government therefore involves the ability to make decisions and to ensure that they are carried out as well. Now, in that sense, a form of government can be identified with most social institutions. For instance, in the family, it is apparent in the control that parents exercise over children. In schools, it operates through the discipline and rules imposed by the teachers, and in the workplace, it is maintained by regulations drawn up by the managers and employers. So, the government therefore exists whenever and wherever ordered rules occur. So, however, the term government is usually understood more narrowly to refer to a formal and institutional process by which rule is exercised at the community, national and international levels. So, as such, government can be identified with a set of established and permanent institutions whose functions is to maintain public order and undertake collective action. Now, the question arises, what is government? So, government was initially made because of the society. Now, as time goes on, the society formed the state. The state is a larger association of humans who dominate and domicile a distinct geographical location, coordinated by a distinct body which rely on sovereign capacity to act over his subject. Now, according to Aristotle, a state is the result of the coming together of diverse human beings who initially have wished to come together in order to aid living through interaction and interrelationship. According to John Locke, humans are a product of nature, who by nature is created independently and equal. So, naturally from birth, humans had been deposited ability and potentials which should be individually and independently used by everyone. Now, this natural ability and potential are called natural rights. However, as human society increased, there is lacking of orderliness and the presence of violation of individual rights. So, the need and the necessity to stop the violation and to protect individual rights lead to coming together of the people to sign mutual agreement. Now, the coming together of this people resulted in the formation of the state. Now, to Thomas Hobbes, there was high rate of insecurity in human society, which was the result of the brutish, nasty human nature, and that has resulted in a state of war in the society. And the necessity to control that state of affair led to the coming together of humans to form a strong and united stand, and which resulted in the formation of state, and which was meant to provide them security. Now another question is, why do we need it? Of course, we need it for security. So government is necessary, assuming that without it, orderly and civilized our existence would be impossible. Scholars may disagree about the organization of government or the role it should play, but they are nevertheless convinced of the need of some kind of orderliness in a society. However, the widespread occurrence of government and its almost uncritical acceptance worldwide does not prove that an ordered and just society can only exist through the agency of government. Indeed, one particular school of political thought is dedicated precisely to establish that government is absolutely unnecessary, and to bring about its abolition is the first duty of individuals. This is anarchism. Anarchy, or literally, means without rule. Now, social contract theorists, they see government as a necessary defense against the evil and arbitrary nature of humans, which is essentially a pessimistic view of human nature. An alternative tradition, however, exists which portrays government as intrinsically kind, benign, and it is a means to promote good and just system to avoid harm. Now, this can be seen in the writings of Aristotle, whose philosophy had a profound effect upon medieval theologians such as St. Thomas Aquinas, and his treatise on law, which is a part of Summa Theologica, which he wrote in 1265 AD. Aquinas portrayed the state as the perfect community and argued that the proper effect of law was to make its subject good. So he was clear, for instance, that government and law would be necessary and it will be based on the goodness of individual. Although he believed that the humans were basically they are in sins, because he believed in Christian theology. So this benign view of government as an instrument which enabled people to cooperate for mutual benefits has been kept alive in the modern politics by the social democratic tradition. Now, if you want to define the government itself, according to Plato, we find that the state government can only function well if there is justice in its structuring. Now, the government of the state should be controlled by the philosophers or the elite, while the courageous ones should be in charge of security and protection of the state, and the farmers and traders should be in class control of finance sector of the state. Now, to Plato, the best government is the one that can establish and maintain justice in the administration of state. So, according to Aristotle, the government is an institution with a defined structure in the state which rule and manage the affairs of the state, which is based on distinct principle or ideology. Now, in Aristotle's discussion about government, he talks about 6 forms of government, which are monarchy, tyranny, aristocracy, oligarchy, polity, and democracy. He, however, concluded by dividing the forms of government into 2 broad forms, which are good government and bad government. Now, he concludes his explanation stating that aristocracy, monarchy, and polity, they make up the good government because they aim at serving the state at large in the interest of the members of the state, while oligarchy, democracy, and tyrannical government are bad governments because they are centered to serve the interest of some group or certain individuals. Thus, the institutions of government are concerned with making, implementation, and interpretation of law. So, law being set of enforceable rules which are binding upon society. So, all systems of government therefore encompass 3 functions. First, legislation, that is to make law. Second, the execution or implementation of law. And third, interpretation of law, the adjudication of its meaning. So, in the field of politics, the word government can be explained on 2 main grounds, which are government as an institution and government as machinery, and that is what we are going to talk about now, the government as an institution. So, government is a set of institutions and concerns of body actors which define how and to what extent the public affairs within the society are to be shaped and directed in a desired direction. So, government is the first virtue of every human association, so every association, it possesses an inviolability founded in the government, which even unity, that is the essential factor of a family, cannot override. So, government is an essential organ which without an association of human society cannot stand. So, due to the inability of humans to control the growth of the human family, there was large increase in the size of every family and its unit, and for that reason there are need for humans as well, which started growing, and they required greater gathering, greater accommodation of family units. Now, this led to the creation of an association of all men, which is known as society. So, government is the body that forms the institution that serves as a machinery for coordinating, interpreting and implementation of law and the doctrine of the law itself. So, government is this, the government is thus the first product of human secondary gathering, which is the society. So, government was established alongside with the society. However, as human population increased, there was a need to form greater society, which eventually led to creation of state. Now, state is thus a large society, and it is the latter product of the older, and then the state is also the government older than the state itself. So, what we find is government has been existing long before the formation of the state. Government in its primitive meaning is a body which keeps, maintain and implement the law which are made due to the necessity of protection of lives of all, guided the rights of all. So, government is an institution with its primitive functions is to protect and implement the law. So, and body, therefore, it is a body that keeps, maintain and implement the law, which can be referred to as government. So, state to be an independent and a sovereign entity, and the government to be a coordinating body in the state which keeps, maintains and implement the law. So, government of the state is that body that keeps the law of the sovereign state. So, the law of the state is supreme, and supremacy of the law is an emblem that represents the sovereignty of the state. So, the government is that body that keeps that law, and not just the law, because the law is not a principle and not an ordinary regulation, but the law is an emblem of sovereignty. So, the government is thus a body that protects and maintains the sovereignty of the state. The government is not just a body, it is an organization, and it is an organized body. So, the government is not just an organized body, and further it is an organization with some distinct structure. So, an institution is an organized body with a distinct structure which is established for a particular purpose for a certain period of its usually a longer period of time. So, institutions are organized body with a distinct structure. It is in unison, it's a unity in body which can arrange for different orders in society. So, government is an institution of the state established for the purpose of establishing and maintaining the sovereignty of the state. Now, when we regard state as a machinery, we see that the individuals who came together to assemble at one place because of their needs, they came to discover the riches in that place where they resided, the land and its various resources, and the man needed to protect those resources from outsiders who will come to steal it or take it away through war or violence. So, like-minded humans with similar views and goals, they came together to form a strong bond, to form a strong association and to form a sovereign territory through unity to defend their land, resources and their property. So, in this newly formed state, not every member was capable of swinging the sword of protection to the resources that they have. So, just as Plato said, every state is made up of three main group of people: the courageous who form the army, the farmers and the traders who form the business class, and philosophers and the elite who form the politicians or the ruler of the state. Now, with the presence of diversity in the characteristics and profession of the human that form the state, there is a similarity in their goal. So, the similarity which is to secure their land, their lives and their property from invaders. In order to achieve this goal, there is a need to establish a machinery, And this machinery was to guarantee them the security of the resources, security of the land, security of their private property. So the machinery established is known as the government. So government is thus a machinery of the state established by the state to secure the state itself. Now, since the government is a powerful body in the state made up of all members of the state to serve the state itself, the government is then charged with the responsibility of managing and controlling the state's resources. So government is thus a machinery of the state made by the state to control, manage and utilize the resources of the state on behalf of members of the state. So to clarify this, government is a territorial body, a machinery that makes up binding authoritative decisions on the subjects, that is the residents, the humans, and the component, the business and the resources that live or exist within its territorial boundary. So the government is an organ in the state which serves as an institution and also as a machinery. So government is an organ that is made up to serve the state, that is the citizens at large. So in order for the government to serve the general interest, the government must possess a certain power, and the power to bind the state, that is the members of the state. So state is known to be a sovereign entity controlled by sovereign body, that is the government, and the government as an organ of the state is a sovereign body which coordinates the affair of the state. Now we talk about the classification, and in this classification of government we talk the traditional classification. Now this traditional classification of government follows the course which was set by Aristotle, and he based his classification on two principles, that is a number of persons who exercised the supreme power, that is the location of sovereignty within the state, and the end that they seek to serve through application of that power. So applying the first, the numerical principle, Aristotle said the numerical principle, that is if sovereignty resides in one person, it is monarchy. If it resides in small minority of population, he says it's aristocracy, and if it resides in a large population or large proportion of population, it is polity. Now having said so, Aristotle then proceeds to distinguish between the normal and perverted form of state. Now basing his conclusion on the ends which the rulers sought to serve, by normal state Aristotle meant one which is guided by rule of law and justice. So the rulers or the ruler in such a state always aimed at the good of the community as a whole. And by perverted state he meant one guided and ruled by the selfish and capricious without law or without restraint. That the ruler or the rulers in such a state were selfish, and he or they exercised power vested in them for his or their own benefits rather than for the benefit of the community as a whole. So monarchy, aristocracy, polity were, according to Aristotle, normal forms of state, and in their perverted form they became tyranny, oligarchy and democracy. So tyranny was degenerated from the monarchy, oligarchy the degenerated from the aristocracy, and democracy the degenerated form of polity. So for Aristotle, monarchy was the best, tyranny was the worst, and tyranny placed in the hands of the king arbitrarily control over the lives and the fortunes of citizens, and all affairs of the state were directed to its own good. So in oligarchy, the wealth or the wealthy few, they ruled for their own selfish ends, and they used their power and the privileges for the oppression of the common people. And democracy meant rule of the mob, and in a democratic state the interest of the none were safe, as there would be confusion all around. So that was the classification given by Aristotle, and with that classification he gave certain salient features of that classification. So Aristotle held that the monarchy, the rule of the true and the good king, would be the best. Yet at the same time he recognized certain practical difficulties in attaining the best. So he therefore concluded that polity was the best, that is a democratic form of government with constitutional guarantees. So Aristotle pointed out that if polity were to disintegrate into its perverted form, the result would not be so bad as the perverted form of monarchy and aristocracy, namely the tyranny and oligarchy. So 2 points about this classification deserve our attention, and that is, the first, Aristotle draws a clear distinction between aristocracy and oligarchy, and Whereas in modern times, we do not differentiate between the two, and we often use them synonymously. Secondly, democracy for Aristotle had not the same meaning as it has for us today. He regarded it as a perverted form, that is, a mob rule, whereas we regard democracy as the best form of government. So, the perverted form of democracy according to modern usage is mobocracy. However, modern sociologists have clearly shown that there is no government of the many. All governments are really governments of the few, or the fact remains that even a substantial handful number rule whatever the nature of society might be or the state might be. So, in determination, all states policy, the exercise actually is in the hands of the few, and that is where it is left for the minorities in that government to deal with the issues of the day. So, the cabinet in Britain is a supreme directing authority and the magnet of policy, as Barker calls it, and it now consists of 16 to 18 members. So, the actual determination, control and direction of cabinet policy rest still in a few hands, that is the inner cabinet. So, the executive power in United States of America is vested in the president, and he has his cabinet, but the role of the cabinet there is simply advisory. So, the policy flows from the president, though it may be influenced by the advice tendered by the cabinet. Now, if we talk about other classifications, we see in spite of these defects, Aristotle's classification was accepted as fundamental till quite modern times, and modern writers, they dropped the ethical and qualitative basis of classification, and the governments on the basis of quantitative basis was analyzed. So, threefold classification of government was effected, that monarchy, aristocracy and democracies became a general accepted form till the end of World War I. When democracy merged others except for subject countries, colonies or dependencies or trust territories, and others were dictatorship had been established. So, among the modern writers, Montesquieu, he proposed a threefold division of republican, monarchical and despotic government. So, the republican government is that in which the people as a body or even as a part of people possess the sovereign power. So, under a monarchical form of government, there is a rule by one single person, but he governs only by fixed and established laws. In despotic government, on the other hand, there is a single person who rules but without any law. He conducts everything according to his will and caprice. Now, how long a particular form of government will last? Now, Montesquieu replies, it is that it depends on the persistence in given society of that particular spirit which in the first place formed that form of government. Now, we move on to the next classification, that is Rousseau. Rousseau divided the governments into monarchies, aristocracies and democracies. He divided aristocracies into three forms, saying it's natural, elective or hereditary. He considers elective aristocracy as the best and hereditary the worst. So, Rousseau was a great champion of direct democracy. He also admitted the existence of mixed form of government. We also find another classification given by BLUNTCHLI. He gives another classification accepting the Aristotle's classification as fundamental, but added one more form to it, that is the form of theocracies. Now, theocracy is that form of government where the supreme power is attributed to God or to a lesser god or to some other superhuman being or to an idea. So, the man who exercises authority are deputies or vice regents of God, and theocracy according to BLUNTCHLI is normal form of government, but when it becomes perverted, it is known as idolocracy. So, such a classification, however, seems quite fallacious. The modern scientist separated religion from politics, and he does not bring God into his division in any form of government. So, his task is to locate sovereign power, and it rests for all the intent purposes either in one person or a body of persons. But except still there are, as in the case of Islamic Republic of Iran and Muslim Arab countries, Pakistan and Afghanistan, there is this form of theocratic form which can be seen. Then we move on to next classification, that is Marriot's classification, a political scientist of recent times. He classified governments on threefold basis. He accepts Aristotle's classification as fundamental, but regards it as inadequate for modern governments. And Marriot's first basis of classification is the distribution of the power of government. So governments are accordingly involved into unitary or federal. In unitary government, there is a concentration of power at the center, and the provincial governments enjoy only delegated power as they are the creation of central government. In federal government, there are two sets of government and authority is derived from these two center and state or provinces governments, and both the form of government enjoy original powers granted to them by the constitution, and each is autonomous in their own sphere of jurisdiction. So Marriot's next basis is that of rigid and flexible constitution, and in the third place his basis of classification is relation between the executive and legislature. When executive is supreme to legislature, the form is despotic in nature. If the executive is coordinating with power, it is a presidential form, and when the executive is subordinate to the legislature, that is the parliamentary form. Then we move on to LEACOCK's classification. Now, classification of Leacock is almost similar to the one given by Marriott. He, however, does not attempt to include in his classification all the historical forms which have appeared in the evolution of the state. So Leacock confines himself to actually existing types of government. So his fundamental division is between despotic and democratic types. In a despotic government, the sovereign power is concentrated in the hands of one single person who rules according to his will. In a democracy, the sovereign power resides in the people as majority of them. So democratic governments are divided into a limited monarchy or a republic. A limited monarchy, the head of government is the king, but his authority is limited. As the United Kingdom, where the king reigns but does not rule. In republican government, the executive is elected by the people for a fixed term of office. Now, each of these types may assume one of the two forms, could be unitary or could be federal. The unitary or federal government may either be parliamentary or presidential. In parliamentary government, the real executive is responsible to the legislature. In non-parliamentary or presidential type, the executive is not responsible to the legislature as in the United States of America. Now, moving to some recent classification, we find that recently the politics is classifying governments in the basis of democracies, authoritarian and totalitarian political systems. Now, democratic political systems are divided into three subclasses. The first of these is the high subsystem autonomy, such as British and American. The second subclass is characterized by limited subsystem autonomy, and it includes France of the Third and Fourth Republic, and Italy after World War II, and Weimar German Republic. And the third class of democratic political system is made up of those with low subsystem autonomy, like Mexico provides an example of this type of democratic system. In authoritarian system, liberty is restricted and parliamentary institutions are absent or meaningless, but they are not tyrannical regimes. So the society is traditionally oriented and power is exercised by small groups such as military leaders, bureaucrats. Finally, there are totalitarian political systems as pre-1990 Soviet Union, the fascist regime in Italy and Nazi Germany. So these regimes are totalitarian because they were based on a dominant leader supported by a mass party acting on an aggressive ideology which explains and conditions his political actions. So a totalitarian regime is different from an authoritarian system by its total control over an attempt to regulate in detail on behavior and by the subordination of all organizations to the state. So finally, we come to the conclusion that is the primary purpose of every state is the same, and every government is charged by the community with a dual task. One is that is establishing the code of living, that is of adjusting this order to new conditions and guarding against emerging needs of the citizens. So it does not matter what the head of the state is called. We shall assign to a particular government proper place and label which is known what it actually does. So in realizing the purpose entrusted to its charge, the well-being of the people. So the well-being and the well-feeding are not synonymous. Well-being means an expression and an expansion in human spirit, and as such it's a question of liberty of all its aspect. On the political front, it implies the responsiveness and responsibility of the government. So how far the government is responsible and responsive, it depends upon the size of the electorate and the freedom that they enjoy in influencing the lawmaking process of the government. So the Greek statesman Alcibiades remarked to his uncle Pericles that a law adopted by the popular assembly was nothing but arbitrary act when the majority imposed it on the minority without any persuasion or without any effort to persuade that minority to accept that law. So, that was the classification of the various forms of a government in previous, the traditional and the modern times, and the purpose of government and the definition of government and what government is and what it does and how it looks and how it functions. So, with that I come to the end of my presentation. Thank you.